I can't remember who it was. It may have been the sheriff came to my door and said that they'd found her body.
It was the day after Thanksgiving, a time when most families are still gathered around the table. Leftovers in the fridge, football on TV, the smell of pumpkin pie still lingering in the air. But on November 24th, 1989, in the tiny rural town of Acme, Washington, a family was about to experience something no one should ever have to face. Their daughter had gone out for a jog. She never came home. Her name was Mandy Stavik, 18 years old, a college freshman full of promise, full of life. She laced up her sneakers, grabbed her German shepherd, Kyra, and headed out along the quiet country roads near her family's home. Hours passed. Then, Kyra came back alone. No Mandy, no explanation, just a dog standing at the door, and a silence that would settle over that small community for nearly 30 years.
All the neighbors were out looking. They canvassed the whole area.
3 days later, searchers pulled Mandy's body from the cold waters of the Nooksack River. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been murdered, and the man who did it, he walked free. He had a family. He lived among them for almost 3 decades. He got away with it. This is the story of Mandy Stavik, a case that went cold, a community that never forgot, and a killer who thought he'd never be found. He was wrong.
And gave her assurances that we were going to do everything we can to bring justice for Mandy and catch who was responsible.
To understand why Mandy Stavik's murder shook Acme, Washington so deeply, you first have to understand who Mandy was. Amanda Teresa Stavik was born on April 16, 1971. She grew up in Whatcom County in the kind of small, tight-knit rural community where everyone knows your name and your family's name too. The mountains loomed in the distance. The Nooksack River ran through the valley. Life moved slowly, and people trusted their neighbors. Mandy fit right into that world. And then some. She was athletic, competitive, the kind of young woman who didn't just participate in life. She threw herself into it. She ran track. She pushed herself. She had the kind of energy that lit up a room. She was also, by every account, genuinely kind. Friends remembered her smile. Family remembered her laughter. She was the daughter who came home for the holidays, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That fall of 1989, Mandy had enrolled at Central Washington University as a freshman. She was 18, and the world was wide open in front of her. A new chapter, new friends, a future she was just beginning to build. She came home for Thanksgiving break that November, back to her family, back to the quiet roads she'd grown up running. She had no idea that the familiar roads she loved, the ones she ran freely and without fear, had become dangerous. She had no idea that someone in her community had already noticed her, someone who would make a choice that November day that would steal everything from Mandy Stavik and haunt an entire town for the next 3 decades. Friday, November 24th, 1989, the day after Thanksgiving, the Stavik family had spent the holiday together, warm, safe. The kind of day that feels normal, because it is, because you don't know yet that it's the last one. That afternoon, Mandy decided to go for a run. This wasn't unusual. Running was part of who she was. She knew these roads. She had run them dozens of times. She took Kyra, her German shepherd, with her. The kind of casual safety measure you take in a small town where violent crime barely registers as a concern. She headed out. The road stretched ahead of her. Trees lined the path. The November air was cold and gray. And that was the last time anyone saw Mandy Stavik alive. Hours went by. Then, Kyra appeared at the front door, alone. The family's alarm was immediate. This wasn't right. Mandy wouldn't have sent the dog home without coming back herself. Something was wrong. They contacted authorities. A search began, first small, then massive. Hundreds of volunteers fanned out across the roads, the woods, the riverbanks. The town mobilized in the way small towns do when one of their own goes missing. Neighbors searched alongside strangers. Fear spread quietly but quickly through the community. Violent crime didn't happen here. That was the unspoken belief. That was the comfort people had always held on to. It was shattered in 3 days.
I absolutely did not think it would ever get solved.
On November 27th, 1989, 3 days after Mandy disappeared,
Taking a lot of side roads and found something I thought was a little bit suspicious.
Detective Ron Peterson found her body near the shore of the Nooksack River, approximately 3.5 miles from where she had started her jog. Peterson, speaking to CBS News decades later, admitted he still gets emotional talking about that moment. He said Mandy looked like my daughter. She was still wet from the river. The medical examiner was called. The scene was processed, and the findings were devastating. Mandy Stavik had been sexually assaulted. She had a bruise on her head, consistent with being struck and rendered unconscious. Prosecutors would later argue that her killer knocked her out and placed her in the cold water of the Nooksack River, leaving her to drown. She was 18 years old, and her killer had vanished back into the community, completely invisible. From the very beginning, investigators knew they were dealing with a crime that left evidence behind. DNA, physical evidence, collected from Mandy's body. In 1989, that was significant, but it was also a limitation. The technology needed to match DNA to a specific individual wasn't what it is today. Investigators tested local men, they interviewed, they followed leads, and they came up empty, slowly, painfully. The case went cold. Years passed, then a decade, then two. The Stavik family lived in that unbearable space, knowing Mandy had been murdered, knowing her killer had never faced justice, watching time move forward while their grief stayed frozen in place. But detectives never fully let go. In the late 2000s and into the early 2010s, advances in DNA forensic technology began reopening doors that had seemed permanently closed. Investigators revisited the preserved evidence. They began using new techniques, including familial DNA analysis, to narrow the field. And then, in 2013, a name emerged: Timothy Bass. Bass had gone to Mount Baker High School, the same school Mandy attended. He had lived near her jogging route in 1989. He had not been a suspect in the original investigation. But when investigators began tracing the unknown DNA from the crime scene, Bass's profile began to align. When they approached him and asked for a DNA sample, he refused. That refusal didn't stop them. It just changed their strategy. Investigators placed Bass under surveillance. For months, they watched. And then, a coworker, a woman named Kim Wagner, agreed to help. She quietly collected items Bass had discarded at work: a soda can, a plastic cup. She handed them over to law enforcement. The DNA extracted from those items was sent to the lab. The result was staggering. According to prosecutors and reporting by King 5 News, scientists determined the chance of that DNA belonging to anyone other than Timothy Bass was 1 in 11 quadrillion. It matched the DNA found on Mandy Stavik's body. When confronted with that evidence, Bass changed his story. He initially denied any contact with Mandy. Then, backed into a corner by science, he claimed they had been in a consensual sexual relationship.
It was more of a friendship type thing. We just talked, and then it just kind of grew into more of a physical thing, and we didn't even really do it that much. So it was more kissing and stuff.
It was a claim with zero supporting evidence. Friends and family testified that Mandy and Tim Bass barely knew each other. There was no evidence of any relationship, romantic or otherwise. And perhaps most damning, Bass's own brother, Tom, took the stand during trial and revealed that after Bass was questioned by police a second time in 2015, Timothy came to him and asked him to claim he had also had sex with Mandy, to make her appear promiscuous, rather than come forward with the truth. Bass allegedly tried to manufacture a defense built on smearing an 18-year-old murder victim. His attorney maintained his innocence throughout.
Yes. Yeah, I believe he had nothing to do with the murder.
But the evidence told a different story, and so did the women who had known Tim Bass for years, women who had been too afraid to speak his name out loud, until the day they finally did. Here is where this case becomes something rare in the world of true crime. It wasn't just forensic science that broke it open. It was two mothers at a water park. In 2013, The same year, investigators were zeroing in on Bass. 2 women who had both attended Mount Baker High School ended up at a local water park with their children. Heather Backstrom and Marilee Anderson barely knew each other. They were acquaintances at best, watching their kids on the water slides when the conversation somehow turned, as it often did in that community, to the unsolved murder of Mandy Stavik. What happened next, both women have described as one of the most surreal moments of their lives. Heather said, "I am sure I know who killed her." Marilee replied, "I do too. Same name, same man, Timothy Bass." Both women had their own encounters with Bass, disturbing, uncomfortable memories that had stayed with them for years. Described an incident from months before Mandy's murder, when she was just 15 years old and Bass was 21. He had been aggressively inappropriate with her in a truck, rubbing a pen along her knees, making comments about her eyes. She said she had always known to avoid him after that. Marilee had her own story, her own reasons for the suspicion that had sat quietly inside her for 2 decades. But here's the thing. Neither woman had ever told law enforcement, as Marilee told CBS News.
I really wasn't ready because we are in a small town, and to accuse someone of something that we don't know for sure is a little scary.
That afternoon at the water park changed everything. Emboldened by each other, they finally spoke his name to a detective, a high school classmate of Marilee's, and the formal investigation into Timothy Bass began. 2 women, a casual conversation, 30 years in the making. It was the thread that unraveled everything. Timothy Bass was arrested in December 2017, 28 years after Mandy Stavik was found in the Nooksack River. His trial began in the spring of 2019 in Whatcom County, Washington. It lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution laid out the DNA evidence, the witness testimony, the damning account from Bass's own brother. The defense tried and failed to cast reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for just over a day. On May 24, 2019, nearly 30 years to the day after Mandy's murder, the verdict came in: guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of rape, attempted rape, kidnapping, attempted kidnapping. In the courtroom, Mandy's family wept. Her brother Mike Brighton spoke at sentencing with raw, barely contained grief. "My family will never be healed, never be normal. Timothy Forrest Bass must never be allowed to walk the earth as a free person. Never, ever." Then Timothy Bass stood up to address the court. He looked at the judge and said, "I would first like to say that I am 100% innocent of this crime." He was sentenced to nearly 27 years in prison. For the Stavik family, justice came, but it came at a cost that can't be calculated. Nearly 3 decades of not knowing. 3 decades of watching a killer live freely. 3 decades of Thanksgiving weekends marked not by gratitude, but by grief. The medical examiner who performed Mandy's autopsy in 1989, Dr. Gary Goldfogel, the longest continuously serving medical examiner in the state of Washington, told the court he still remembered the shock of seeing her on the examination table, still wet from the river. He said the team just wished she'd wake up. She never did, but the truth did. The murder of Mandy Stavik is now studied as one of America's defining cold case breakthroughs, proof that preserved DNA evidence, advancing forensic technology, and the courage of ordinary people can together deliver justice that once seemed impossible. It's also a reminder of something the true crime community knows all too well. Killers don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like neighbors, like coworkers, like someone you passed in the hallway at school. Mandy Stavik deserved a full life. She deserved to finish college, to run her races, to come home for every holiday. She deserved everything that was stolen from her on a quiet road in November 1989. Her family will carry that loss forever, but they also carry something else now. Her name, her story, and the knowledge that, in the end, the truth won. Rest in peace, Mandy Stavik. April 16, 1971, November 24, 1989. You were loved, you were not forgotten, and you were never alone in that river because your community never stopped looking for justice. Timothy Bess maintained his innocence even after conviction, even after a 1 in 11 quadrillion DNA match. Do you believe justice was truly served with a 27-year sentence? And if those two mothers at the water park had never spoken up, do you think this case would ever have been solved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.